there and welcome. There's a huge low-carb buzz circulating the fitness and diet industries. Now we all know what low-carb means, but how does that work in relation to diets high in fat? And furthermore, how does this affect you and your body if you're an athlete, or better yet, an endurance athlete? I'm here with Russ Scala, who's more than an expert in this field, and he's going to discuss the high-carbohydrate versus high-fat diets and how it relates to you as an athlete. Russ, tell us a little bit about your history as an athlete and then what you've done in testing athletes.
Well, we started testing athletes back in 1984. I just left the SWAT team and I was trying to find a sport that would help me deal with the dead air and stop abusing alcohol. So I ended up with working out with a bunch of triathletes. And that was sort of ground zero for me. We were using a high-carb diet back then. We were training to do half Ironman and international distance races. And I was really blessed because I had two mentors, Jerry Gergley and Don Ardell, who were PhDs at a UCF, I was sort of following their lead because they were in their 50s and they were really fast and they knew a lot about the sport, so I started training with them.
So let me get this straight. I kind of know what you do, but just for the audience out there, you test the individuality of individuals, their biochemical markers. So genetics testing. Tell us a little bit about the genetics that you test that really shows how everyone is biochemically unique.
Yeah. Everyone is biochemically unique. So what that means is everybody's going to need different nutrition and different diet, different supplementation, and that's sort of where we're headed. Even every athlete that I work with, they have different nutritional deficiencies. And the lab that I work with and the physicians that I work with, we do that advanced testing to drill down to see what they need. I mean, we can't expect somebody to just take a handful of vitamins and expect something to happen with the millions of metabolic responses in the body. If we're going to improve somebody's performance, we got to look at multiple areas, whether they're 8 years old or 80.
Got it. So you do genetic testing, find deficiencies, and then you just correct those deficiencies.
Exactly.
Simple.
Exactly.
All right, so getting back on the athlete track here, tell us about some of the athletes you work with and what you found out when you tested them.
Yeah, that was really interesting. We tested thousands of athletes, and we found a lot of them had imbalances in their hormone levels, imbalances in nutrition. And one of the main things that we found is they had an imbalance in their intestinal tract. So when your intestinal tract is out of balance, you're not even pulling any nutrients out of food. So back in the early 80s and the 90s when we started testing athletes, we knew that the high-carb diet caused imbalances in yeast overgrowth in the intestinal tract. And we know now the intestinal tract is a second brain. So if your intestinal tract is out of balance, it affects how you feel and it affects your performance. And stepping it up a little, my Crohn's and irritable bowel clients have low growth hormone because their intestinal tract is so out of balance they're not pulling protein out of the meat that they're eating, and it's keeping their growth hormone or their recovery hormone low. So that's to tell you how important the intestinal tract is in the area of performance. Okay,
so if these athletes want to do a low-carb diet then, okay, so they stop eating all the high carbs, they do a low-carb diet, can they just do low-carb or do they need to supplement the fats in there? Because it's my understanding that you need another fuel source. If you take one fuel source away, you need to supplement with another fuel source. And so those are fats, right? So tell us a little about that.
Yeah, that's a great question. For years, athletes all thought carbohydrates were important. We've been studying anthropologists and evolutionary biologists who study cultures since the beginning of time. And even on a cellular level, when DNA unzips to help our bodies create new tissue, it needs essential fatty acids, it needs essential amino acids, but there's no essential carbohydrates. So helping people clean the slate from their brain and having them think differently, we have to use a lot of historical data. Like we have cultures alive today that don't eat any carbohydrates at all. The Maasai tribe in Africa. We've got the Inuit Indians in the Antarctica with the frozen tundra. Where are they going to grow carbs up there? I mean, the Aborigine tribes, they're all very low in carbs. So when you tell people that you really don't need any carbohydrates, a lot of those people are addicted to the carbs and they're not cutting them out of the diet, but it's an education process. It's education. Intermittent fasting is becoming real popular. You know what I mean? That we're all going to be getting away from the high carbohydrate diets, whether it's sports performance or helping an elderly person walk better.
So whether you're in a culture that doesn't have carbs available or you just want to have a low carb diet, we were talking about supplementing fats and how you need to increase your fats in your diet because that's a different or better fuel source. So in order to do that, you have to shift from your carb burning or glucose
Right.
to fat burning or ketones.
Right,
So tell us a
exactly.
little bit about that shift there.
All right, when we have athletes that are high carb athletes and we're shifting their body into burning body fat, that's a transition. We call it the carbohydrate flu when they go through that. And we give people monitors so they actually check their blood and see if they're in fat burning. But a lot of folks feel so bad in this interval, they don't power through it. And that's where we have to hold their hand and make sure they understand this feeling is going to pass. Because once you shift your body from burning carbohydrates or glucose to burning fat, the fat that we measure is called beta-hydroxybutyrate. That's a big word for a ketone that supplies your brain and your heart with the energy to keep moving. And that's where all the athletes, that's where all this training is going to be headed. We're going to be on high-fat diets. So the person that just won the Western States 100-mile run was on a high-fat diet. I've got clients right now on a high-fat diet up to 70 to 80%, and they're utilizing fat for fuel.
Just to make a note on top of that, I've actually done the little transition from burning carbs to burning fats. And you go through that transitionary period, which is very frustrating because you have low energy and frustration. I almost had a little bit of an anxiety attack.
That's what you felt.
Because, yeah, absolutely. Because your body is shifting and burning up all the sugar in your muscles.
Good for you.
And so once you get through that, you on the other side, when you're in ketosis, you feel like $1 million when
There you
you're on
go.
like a high. It's actually quite amazing.
Yeah, and when people, and that's what I'm saying, when you were going through that, it was kind of scary. So if you have somebody that's been eating carbohydrates for 20 years and then you're shifting their body into fat burning, that's when you really got to maintain contact with them. You got to help them through that 5 or 10 days as your body's learned how to burn body fat. And when that does, it's a natural antidepressant. Your brain is firing on 12 cylinders. I have clients that are super creative. I've got everybody from rock stars to high-level engineers in this program, and when they're on this diet, amazing things happen, just like you felt. But it was scary in the beginning, wasn't it?
Yeah. But so much more energy, so much more mental clarity. It's great.
Fantastic.
But it takes a lot, though, a lot of willpower. your food choices go from here to like this much. It definitely shrinks. But it's worth it, that's for sure. Tell us a little bit about how you transformed your metabolism into fat burning back in the 90s. You actually had a friend that you cycled with.
Yeah, back in the 90s, of course, all my roommates were professional triathletes, and I was never as fast as they were, but I did train with them during the warm-up. but one of my buddies was Patrick Davis. I mean, this guy would finish in the top 10 of races, and he was always shredded and very fast, a track star. And great guy, and he started gaining weight, and he'll tell you about this. So I was doing research back then, trying to tweak everything because I was so slow. and we started using the ketogenic diet back in '96. And Patrick and I started experiment with this. And it's amazing, the fat just fell off after we were applying this ketogenic diet or the fat burning diet or the high fat diet to endurance exercise.
1990, I was 25 years old. I ran into Russ Scala at the Rollins pool. A big group of us were doing triathlons back then. We had completely bought into the high carbohydrate, the low fat, and high sugar diet really for endurance athletes. So, we were eating lots of breads, lots of pastas, your energy bars, your energy drinks. Those were all secret weapons, that we used against each other in racing triathlons. My typical day, we would swim in the morning, and then I would go to work and have a sleeve, not a cookie, but a sleeve of cookies and a cup of coffee to get me to lunch. Go out for lunch. Usually it's processed foods of some sort, or pastas. An obvious crash afterwards when you get back to work, so you had to have the other sleeve of cookies and more coffee to get you to the workout for the evening. Maybe a half a sandwich on the way to a run or a bike ride, and then right before bed, of course, when you come home from the bike ride, you're pounding another big plate of pasta right before you go to bed. So I have very atypical of what we're looking at as far as the ketogenic diet goes. And I remember specifically after a swim workout one day going into Einstein's, and Russ and I were sitting around a table talking to a bunch of marathon folk. They'd just come back from a 22-miler. And one of the things that stuck out in both of our heads were, gosh, we couldn't believe the amount of miles these guys were putting in, and they were all kind of chunky around the middle. Could you how do you maintain that? We were just trying to think. Again, I'm 25 years old at this point in the game. My metabolism's through the roof no matter what I'm throwing down the hatch. So, but something that definitely stuck in my mind. And by the time I was 30, in like 1995, I was realizing how that happened. I was getting a little pudgy around the middle myself, carrying some extra weight that I really didn't want. I had progressed as a triathlete, gained some fitness, was doing pretty well, but was facing the winter. We didn't train nearly as much. I was doing some runs, maybe a swim or two, and Russ said, hey, I really don't think this high carb thing is that. In fact, I believe it might be bad for us. He was just reading some clinical studies, and so he said, why don't we try this? I said, I'm game. This is an emergency. We got to do something and do something fast. So both of us kind of jumped into this ketogenic diet. We were looking at eggs in the morning with coffee, water to drink. For lunch, more tuna salad, chicken salad, and then some sort of a meat and vegetable for dinner at night. Was really kind of what we were looking at. And then on the bike rides, and I went way against the stream on this, is I was drinking water on the bike rides, and if we would stop at a store, I really got made fun of, but I'd pick up a chili dog. Or something with some meat in it while everybody else was chasing after their Gatorade refills and their energy bars. So, but the neat thing that happened through that winter is I kept running, I kept swimming a little bit, but my waist shrunk, which was great. I also gained 10 pounds through that particular winter, but it was in my legs and upper body. I was carrying a little more strength with me. And I didn't race for that winter or anything at all, so I really didn't have any place where I knew that, was I improving, not improving. I ran by myself. I didn't really use my watch. I just wanted to get through the miles. But we had a corporate 5K. Orlando sponsors about 5,000, 6,000 runners in the spring that my company wanted to get a team together for, and they made me captain to do all the administrative work and to run, obviously. But I showed up to this thing. I was more interested in getting our team's T-shirts together and their numbers, but I wound up kind of in the front 100 there where the seated guys are. Gun goes off. I hadn't stretched, I hadn't warmed up, but was feeling okay, not great, but got caught up in the moment. We kind of ran through the first mile there, probably 40 of us, at about a 5-minute pace. And I knew then, I said, wow, that was a little on the hot side for a lot of these guys, me included, I thought. But I just kind of started feeling better. The 40 turned to 10 in the second mile. And by the third mile, it was just me and another guy. He was pretty intimidated, tall, skinny kid, long legs. I said, well, I'll just do my best against this guy. And I wound up surging at the 3-mile mark and actually winning the race with about a 16-minute 5K, which, strangely enough, with really no additional training, no tempo runs, anything like that, I dropped my 5K time from 18 minutes to 16 minutes, and I attribute most of that really to the ketogenic diet. So.
And it mentally kind of plays with you too, because from my understanding and my experience too, you don't need to eat 3 meals a day. You don't have to get up and have a huge breakfast, a huge lunch, and a huge dinner. So when you're only eating just a handful of nuts and maybe some coffee with some almond milk in it or some coconut milk for breakfast time, and then a small lunch and a small dinner, your body or your brain's like, come 4 o'clock, shouldn't you be having a snack? So you have to get over that. No, I don't need to be eating because my body doesn't need it. Exactly. So talk a little bit about the mental bump that people have to get over from carbohydrate addiction.
Right, exactly. Well, a lot, carbohydrates, we call them poor man's Prozac because it elevates serotonin levels. I deal with clients that have a carbohydrate addiction.
It's like withdrawal,
I know.
Right?
Yeah, and I don't even put them on the diet until we balance out their brain chemistry and correct some deficiencies. But when you transition away from carbohydrates and you start burning body, and when you start burning fat for fuel, those ketones will light your brain up like a Christmas tree. We could see it in MRIs.
That's amazing.
Students, it helps with long-term potentiation, and that's a long way of saying when you read something, you're able to store it in long-term storage. So a lot of amazing things will happen when you transition over to fat burning, physically and mentally, mood-wise. And we don't really need to eat 3 meals a day. Again, that's hard for somebody to get their head around. What do you mean we don't need to eat 3 meals a day? And I'm saying, well, there's cultures. We're one of the only cultures that eat 3 meals a day. And or the other, there's across the world, like I said, we some of them only eat one meal a day. So physiologically, on a cellular level, we know we don't need 3 meals a day. If we track from history, from the beginning of time, the different cultures, they don't eat 3 meals a day. So we're constantly eating carbohydrates 3 meals a day, and our blood sugar is fluctuating, and that's how we get cravings, and our brain lights up saying we need to eat.
Insulin levels are going through the roof.
Insulin levels.
Diabetes. All
yeah, I mean, look at diabetes, obesity, heart disease. They're at epidemic proportions, and nobody's really looking at, hey, do we really need to eat 3 times a day?
What's the food?
What's in the food?
Well, on top of that too, talk about calories, because we apparently have been counting calories all wrong. So I'm going to mention the name here, Wilbur Olin Atwater. Okay, and tell us a little give us a little history lesson on him and how that's kind of played.
Yeah, William Olin Atwater in the early 1900s. He was a chemist at a lab, and he was studying starvation. And he had this bomb calorie meter that would measure the chemical reactions of different metals. So he said, wow, if I put food in this bomb calorie meter, I can measure how much food burns off and how many calories are in each meal. So he was studying.
Sounds logical.
Yeah, I know, right? So he made a leap, and he was an innovator. But he put in the bomb calorie meter proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. And what he did back in the early 1900s at the university he was a professor at still holds true today on the food labels. And it's wrong. But again, hats off to William Olin Atwater.
Well, tell us a little bit how it's wrong. What did he do?
Well, here's what happened. He burned off carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. And he made the leap saying, this is how our body burns off fuel. So he started, adding how many calories were in meat and carbohydrates and potatoes, and he started giving them a calorie count depending on what the bomb calorie meter said. But that isn't how our bodies work.
That has nothing to do with how your body
burns.
No,
it has nothing to do with it, but he made a leap, and he made a good argument, and people started going, oh, this is great. I could eat this many calories a day. It isn't, if everybody's biochemically unique, you could have a piece of cake, a piece of meat, okay, and macadamia nuts, and your body will process them all differently, depending on the individual. So even though he made a leap, and he came up with a great idea, it's still on our food labels today.
2,000 calories for everybody, across the board, no matter who you are, how big or small
anyway, you are. You always got to follow the money and follow the history on things, and you get a great education.
Along with that history lesson, let's go into the warrior diet you've mentioned before. What warriors did for performance during battle.
Yeah, if you go back to the beginning of time, you drill down and find out what some of these guys were eating. Like during Genghis Khan's time, when they didn't want to be seen, they wouldn't start a fire and cook food. They would ride their horses and put the slabs of steak underneath the saddle so it would become tender so they could eat that. And then the greatest sports drink in the world, they would puncture the artery on their horse and drink some of the blood, right, proteins and fats, to keep going so they didn't have to start that fire and be seen. So there's a lot of interesting perspectives on what people ate. The Roman soldiers were called the bread eaters because they consumed a lot of bread, and they didn't last long when they were in battle. Another thing that when they were crossing the Pyrenees, I think it was Genghis Khan's group, also used a high-fat, something that looked like a billiard ball. It was animal fat made into a ball. Inside was caffeine. It was coffee beans, and they would eat that, and they said it sustained them with energy for up to 2 to 3 days. So they were basically in ketosis. They were burning beta-hydroxybutyrate on their brain and their heart. So it's really interesting when you study history and what they did for sports performance, and then you look at what happened the last 10,000 years when we became addicted to the agricultural carbohydrates. It sort of changed things, you know. Again, follow the history and what people ate. I mean, they weren't eating 3 meals a day.
Follow the money too.
Yeah, follow the money and follow. And in fact, they even came out with this week. They came out with a new energy bar. It's pure buffalo protein, pure buffalo meat. So the shift is happening in real time.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of that stuff. A lot of granola bars and a lot of things on the shelves of grocery stores are low glycemic, okay, high fats, higher fats. So we do see a lot of shift in that.
Exactly. And Disney World's like last year sold more turkey legs than they did hamburgers. So I mean that was in the New York Times. So that's cool. So people are understanding the importance of protein, bringing down their their blood sugar levels and avoiding the simple carbohydrates. Even Coke and Pepsi took a hit. People aren't buying the liquid candy as much anymore.
They've been taking a hit for the past couple of years. Poor guys, man, it must be rough over there.
I know, right?
Coming to a close here, we talked about carbs, the carb addiction, and then how fats are a more efficient fuel source for the body. Let's go into exercise a little bit, how it kind of relates to some of these endurance athletes. So how is exercise important to each patient and each individual based on whether they're an athlete or an endurance athlete?
Right. Now, everybody has this idea what exercise is in their head or what they want to look like. Everybody has this image in their head because I work with, like I said, thousands of athletes. Do you want to go fast? Do you want to be a marathon runner? Do you want to be a bodybuilder to maintain muscle mass? All those things are a little different in everybody. So we try to plug in programs that help them get to where they want to go. Now, muscle is very expensive tissue to maintain. Okay, when I've worked with bodybuilders and I watched other parts of their body break down when they're maintaining 30, 40 pounds of muscle. I watched endurance athletes like myself break down from high cortisol, losing muscle mass. So I've immersed myself in these two different fields. When you go on the high-fat diet, your body actually releases amino acids and protects your muscle.
Okay.
That's really interesting.
That's another mental hump that people have to get over. So you're in ketosis, you're eating a high-fat diet, you go to the gym or you finish working out, immediately people want to pound a sports drink or eat a protein bar or something.
Great.
Is that...
No, and here's where we go, and here's the hook. Remember, it seems like we're all plugged into the matrix, watching TV, we're listening to the ads and all the fitness magazines. Here's the deal. For thousands of years, millions of years, we used fat. When you're going into workout, you do not need to power those power drinks. You elevate your insulin levels and you shut off fat burning. When you go into the gym, you have about an hour and a half of energy in your muscles and another hour in your liver. Think about those marathon runners, the Kenyan marathon runners that cross the finish line in 2 hours and 3 minutes, which means they burn through the 3-mile mark in almost a 14-minute, under a 4-minute pace, under a 5-minute pace. They don't take in any sports drinks. But a lot of the marathon runners that I work with, they're drinking the goo and they're slamming the jellies and they're eating the power bars on a 10-mile run. But that's why they gain weight. They gain weight. That's why the marathon runners gain weight.
But, because I know some of your clients have asked you about that, or about this before, and even just the mental hump of, okay, I get out of the gym, I worked out, I need to go have a protein shake because I need to refuel my muscles with amino acids and stuff. But if you're in ketosis, if you're in fat burning, you're talking about how your amino acids automatically are skyrocketing or elevating, or your growth hormone is elevated. So talk a little bit about that.
Exactly. One of the things happens when let's say you're exercising.
Physiologically, talk about it.
Yeah. Physiologically, when you're exercising, you lower your blood sugar, you lower your insulin levels, and you increase growth hormone or your repair hormone. When you're on the ketogenic diet, or you're doing some intermittent fasting, and you're not moving, you're also lowering your blood sugar, lowering your insulin level, and you're increasing growth hormone. So when I use the ketogenic diet, when I use the high-fat diet, and we plug that in with some intermittent fasting, amazing things happen to people. They have more energy, they're more focused, they don't lose muscle mass. Yeah. That's what they teach us, that if you don't eat a certain amount of calories a day, you're going to lose muscle mass, but in this situation, it's not true. Yeah. Like I said, we studied a lot of cultures that only eat one meal a day since the beginning of time, and they're fine. There's something called 13-carbon delta where you could check the bones of some of these cultures and find out what they were eating now with the DNA testing that's out there, the amount of plants and the amount of meat that they were eating. So we're getting a perspective and a picture on what happened years ago so we could apply it today. And I'm telling you, the high-fat diet that we're using in our athletes is going to be the future of performance.
All right, so let's wrap it up here. So what do you want people to take away from this long conversation that we've had? High-carb diets versus high-fat diets. What's like the big takeaway you want them to leave with?
Well, what I want people to do is, listen, our team is all about education. As you know, we want them to go to the Russ Scala YouTube channel, get up to speed, get educated, clean the slate in your head, open your mind up and try some new things. Keep a logbook. Try these diets. If you want to lose weight, don't restrict calories. You may have to increase your fat intake, and I know you haven't been trained to do that. Keep a logbook, get some baseline blood work, get educated on our YouTube channel, and don't be afraid to try new things.
All right, that's a great little talk. Thanks for coming out here. I appreciate. Hopefully everybody at watching this had a good time and learned something. So thanks a lot, Russ.
Thank you.